Be sure to subscribe and like our channel. Welcome, everyone. It is Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole podcast and the Queen City Curio video cast. As we always say every week, if you're in the Toronto area, you know where to find the finest occult goods is the Queen City Curio Apothecary. We got it. Tonight,
we do.
This week, we're making peaceful home powder. So if you want to come by tomorrow, peaceful home powder. That's how it rolls at the Queen City Curio. And tonight we have a topic. Well, it's a sort of topic close to my heart, as many people know. I'm initiated Haitian voodoo priest. But tonight we're going to talk about a lot of the African traditional religions, all in one kind of survey book. We've had Lilith Dorsey on the show before. She talked about the water magic, and everyone loved it. That book's out by Lalonde. But today she's got a sort of new book. We say sort of new. Everything kind of time delay and COVID reality is still sort of going on. She's got a particular book on voodoo. Hold it up, Zach. You got it, right?
Yes, I do. Right here. Voodoo.
Yay.
And the African traditional religions.
So this book is a survey of multiple African traditional religions. We're going to talk about kind of a comparative view of some of these different sister traditions that share some similar and some different influences. Kind of take a higher view of this for today and kind of go forward. So one of the things, I mean, you've been practicing voodoo, I know, for a while and kind of that. But this book kind of has one undercurrent that a lot of these traditions come from places that have uncertain futures when you actually read the book. And it's a thread that we kind of picked up, that many of the traditions, when they were created or being formed, these sister traditions had sort of an uncertainty that colored the magic and how the kind of religions work.
Yeah.
Did we lose Lilith? Oh, there
nope, she's there.
I'm still here. No, I think that's, it was sort of born out of this oppression and this stress. And then I think that just the way the world is, that they're still in precarious positions a lot of times.
So a lot of these traditions tend to have an outward focus. And that kind of goes along with this uncertainty, sort of oppression and uncertainty and economic sort of uncertainty. It's not quite like maybe some of the Western traditions and some Eastern traditions that have a very inward focus. And I think sometimes we were talking about kind of a lot of the different aspects of the book, and I think a lot of times that external aspect, or hoodoo and sorcery or conjure or getting stuff, actually gets looked down upon. But I think these traditions are sort of making a point about the uncertainty and community structure of a lot of these religions and why it's so needed. And maybe you could tell us about that. The commonalities.
Well, I think in every case, sort of religions of marginalized people, and it's a response. It doesn't matter if we're talking about, Umbanda in Brazil and Pombagira being somebody that, sex workers would go to because they can't necessarily go to the police, or, somebody using a high John root in hoodoo or conjure to take to a demonstration against, the police and to support the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that in those cases, you can see that we can't necessarily always get equal justice or fair justice or even protection and safety on some level. So I think that's intrinsic to the magic. And I think that thinking of it as bad is a privileged way of thinking of it. And I don't want to sound all like woke warrior, but I think that if you're not used to being in situations where you need to be protected, or where you can't get justice, or where you can't call the police and have them respond effectively and, not die. So you need these kinds of things.
Oh, you could we get a hate mail every week. You can sound how you want. Don't worry about it, right? No holds bar. That's the new motto. So we totally kind of understand that. Like, this is a different. It is sort of a privileged approach when you don't have to worry about those things, and then your magic looks like it doesn't have to worry about those things. And this is not what we're talking about. In all of these traditions, none of them are in privileged positions where they can just ignore physical results, And you bring up an excellent point about the high John and a demonstration, sort of get the police to back down, magically speaking. Could be the difference between living and dying in some of the demonstrations nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've seen this just not in the ATRs, but I think that, again, outside of first world countries, this is the reality for a lot of people. And that's just stuff that they have to deal with all the time. And you're going to use whatever you have. But if we have these systems, which have been in place for 2,500 years, depending on, how you count it, a very long time. And it's been doing stuff the same way for a very long time. It's seen empires and kingdoms and slavery and, all these things happen to it. And it stayed a strong system. I'm not saying it hasn't changed over the years. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. But I think we're finally, luckily, at a place where we can talk about it, where it's not hidden in the basement. Or, I used to, when my kids were little, I used to have to worry about, I can't tell anybody I'm a practitioner of these things because, we would get in trouble, you'd get investigated, and your kids might get taken, So I think that I'm glad that we're not still being persecuted in that way, but we still have a lot of struggles.
And I think, one of the things is, maybe, there was the whole scare of the 80s. And there is a lot, depending which state you're in the States, there's still a lot sort of persecution. And in some of these countries, there's a lot of persecution, which gets to the whole, one of the misunderstood aspects of them is that overriding Catholic influence in some of these traditions. And what that appearances might be deceptive. And trying to fit in with the sort of sneak it under the oppressor's guise. And that's been going on for a while. And maybe you could talk about that, because I think that's a misunderstood aspect of this that people just don't get because they haven't studied the cultures these religions come from and why they might do that, why they might hide something underneath something else without because I think a lot of listeners might be used to, you're free to do whatever you want, but they're not. And you just kind of talked about that, about the basement, and not being able to talk about it openly until recently.
Yeah, I think it was secluded again, for safety reasons. And even I remember growing up, it's hard to disassociate that kind of Christian iconography with, the practice of something that is an alternative, to that dogma, to that, structure and things like that. But I think in a lot of cases, it was okay for somebody to have, a statue of Mary instead of a statue of Yemaya. That was number one. Number two, I think that, you couldn't get a statue of Yemaya, 100 years ago, unless you were in the right place at the right time. They didn't make them in the same kind of, extensive mass market kind of global economy we have now. So that makes those things easier, and I think that both of those things have to be taken into consideration. But also, there's still people that practice both. There's still people that will go to church on Sunday, and then Saturday night they'll be, dancing at a bembe or leaving offerings at the altar or something like that.
I think that's maybe you could talk about that a little bit more, because I think I get it. Zach gets it. maybe a
Yep.
lot of listeners don't quite get that because, but I think it goes right to what you're talking about, um, the practical nature of things. But maybe you could talk more about how that works, how people do that, how they kind of the attitude that they come to that, and the culture that kind of leads to that being perfectly normal and okay.
Well, I think that, there's a lot of people grew up with that. I think a lot of people doing that would be very hard for them. There was, people always make that joke about, I don't have a problem with Christ, I have a problem with Christians. You know what I mean? So I think even to anybody looking at it logically, that some of the things that are associated with Christianity do have noble points to them. But because of all the rest of it, it does have a lot of baggage for people. And I can understand why they want to put it down. But I think those people should just also still be open to the fact that, maybe this is something they grew up with. Maybe it's something they learned. Maybe it's something they don't really feel like they need to reject in order to still honor these forces. Every book I write talks about the concept of Ashe, talks about the sacred energy of things. And I think that you can salute this sacred energy of things in different ways. We both have a good friend, Louis Martinet, who I very fortunately saw recently on St. John's Eve. Hooray.
Nice.
I know, I was so happy he came back to New Orleans for Priestess Miriam's
We
ritual.
were going to try to follow him up to Toronto.
We definitely do. We definitely
We were going to try, but then COVID came about, and now so it's been a little tougher.
Oh.
We're still going to try to get him up here.
Well, I remember going to an early ceremony with him once, and at that point we had a large, number of people who would show up that were more traditional Christians, and they would get in this kind of like Jesus possession moment. And I remember Louis looked over to me once and he said, whenever Jesus comes in, he doesn't like to shut up. Like she just went on and on. And I was like, yeah, this is true. So for them, it was perfectly fine. They could integrate these things. This was a spirit possession moment where Jesus had something to say, or a spirit possession moment where Shango had something to say. It didn't really make a difference to them. They allowed for that because their experience allowed for that. And I think that's really the key to it. I don't think anybody should rush out tomorrow and join 5 different traditions and try to practice them simultaneously. But if you grew up with that, if that's part of your ancestry, if that's what you learned, if some of it makes sense, if some of it you think is valuable, I think there's nothing wrong with still moving forward with that if you're okay with it.
Yeah, and that brings up a really good point too, because when you're talking about the ATRs and these traditions, there's a wide influence from many different cultures. So in the book, you were discussing a little bit like of the different islands, but we know generally with the islands that they have different colonial influences from different European countries. So how did you find, or if you can talk about more about like how does things like the French or the Portuguese or the Spanish influence those different traditions in those countries?
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, I think at its core, it's the linguistics of it. You know what I mean? How you choose to say something makes a big difference. And I remember when I was writing, I think it was this book, and I called up a Haitian Creole friend of mine and I said, how do I say the plural of Loa? Because I've heard it both ways. I've heard it Loa or Loas. And like in Creole, it's Loa Yo. And I was like, that's fantastic.
That is.
It's just like Loa, yo, that means a whole bunch of them, so I was just like, this is great. But I think that, again, what is important in the tradition is going to be, influenced by that language, that colonial kind of thing. What's allowed is going to be influenced. If we talk about, the French in Haiti and New Orleans, we've got a whole statue here. We call her Joni at the Pony, and it's a St. Joan, and it has this whole legend, and people go there to leave offerings and all of these things. And the French gave it to us and got locked away and all of this stuff. But it's this kind of thing like, okay, we have this connection, even though we're in the, we're not in France, but we still have this connection to some of those things that are part of French culture. And that finds its way into our religion, in the food, in the language, in some of the rhythms and things like like that. I mean, it's going to. It's and people ask me sometimes about the Voodoo Spiritual Temple, which I'm a part of, Priestess is a part of, Louis Martinet is a part of, which Dr. Utu is a part of. And when we started, we had, Louis was a drummer, but there were two other drummers, and they were both Cuban. So I think a lot of the influence that we had, and Utu has a lot of Cuban influences, so when we came to this, there was a lot of Cuban people bringing that to the table, or Cuban ashe showing up to the table. So that's why we have that in our practices more so than somebody like Sally Ann Glassman, who runs the healing center here, who has more of a Haitian French background, which is more French influenced her practices.
It's very interesting because, like, you're describing a very organic set depending on the group culture, and there's no judgment going on about that. It's okay. And that seems to fit a lot of the history of both regional kind of voodoo temples in Haiti and New Orleans voodoo in general, and probably some of the other religions, which I'm less familiar with, like Obe and Papeguera. But what you're describing is much more of a practical approach, a much more, this is what we have, and this is the ashe that's around us, so let's work with it.
Sure. I mean, I think anybody who's been to ceremony knows that's pretty much a volatile thing anyway. No matter how much you prepare, no matter how much you have a script or the ingredients, or you think everybody knows what to do, it's always a bit of a like, So I think that starting off with the premise of we're going to work with what we have, we're going to work with the strengths that we know we can play to, we're going to welcome anything that shows up in a loving and respectful manner. And I think that's just really how it went along like that for a really long time, because we're not talking about, I mean, I have a book, but we're not talking about a religion that has one major book where everything is written down and all the same, or anything like that. So it was really, okay, this is what we're going to do here because this is what we have.
Now, one of the things that come out in a lot, to go back to it, a lot of the religions come out of sort of revolutionary conflicts, or conflicts with pirates, or conflict against oppression is kind of a theme of a lot of, well, especially for, like, we know for Haiti, but a lot of the other religions also sort of had that similar theme that comes across from the survey when you compare all of them. And maybe you could talk about that, because you're kind of like, it's there constantly, that and you kind of mentioned it before about a lot of these religions give a voice to or give power back to the people who are oppressed.
Yeah, I think they do. They do give them power back. They do give them sort of like a great equalizer. You know what I mean? I think that a lot of the religions you look at, they are definitely, especially in Haiti and New Orleans, we're talking about voodoo queens. We're talking about female-dominated religions, people who didn't necessarily have the same type of traditional strengths in the community, and they were able to gain strengths through their knowledge of herbs, through their knowledge of magic, through their knowledge of secrets, literally. And that allowed sort of balance out slightly. I'm not saying it's equal then, it's certainly not equal now, but I think it allowed a choice really for people that didn't have other choices. All those stories about Marie Laveau going to the, prisoners on death row and bringing psychedelic gumbo. I love that story. It's like, well, they're going to execute you, but here's some magic mushroom gumbo. Make your last couple of days a little bit easier, and I think, like that's just beautiful. I love that.
So what do you see as some of the similarities and differences between the different traditions that you included, kind of in the survey of different traditions?
I mean, I think originally I wrote it because I wanted it to be that, like, okay, if I'm in one tradition and I'm going to a different ceremony, what's going to be the same? What's going to be different? And there's very little that's the same, I think. I mean, I'd like to say, oh, yeah, and I think that beginners or newbies, oh, yes, Aloha is the same as an Orisha. Well, it's not, the same way that French isn't the same as Spanish, isn't the same as English, like if I ate in all those restaurants, the food would be different. If I listened to the music would be different. So there are some commonalities, but even if we talk about somebody like Ogun, which is, one of the few that actually has the same name as both an Orisha and Aloha. In Haiti, he's usually honored with the color red. In Santo or Santeria, he's honored with green. So it's like the color isn't even the same. So some of the energy is the same, but some of the energy is different. So I think it's reductionist to think that they're all the same, even though the same way that you would think any, race of people was all the same. It's individual to the location, not just, as you were asking me, Zachary, and not just from the colonizer, but also the indigenous people that were there, to the immigrant people that came over and blended with them, after that, because of, socioeconomic factors, or, okay, we have to live next to these Irish people, or we have to live next to these people from this culture. So if we're having a ceremony and they're having a ceremony, and, theirs is for Brigitte and mine's for Mama Brigitte, what's going to be the same? What's going to be different? And I think that there's a way, again, they can meet, but they are really very different and distinct. That's my opinion. Yes, you're going to have a guardian of the crossroads in each one, but you could probably say that for any religion in the world. Cross stuff happens at the crossroads, so there's going to be somebody there checking it out and like, yeah, all right, you got this, I got this, I could go one of many different ways, which way good, so I think that happens. There's a reliance on music and dance, but I probably say that about all religions as well.
Right. And I mean, bringing up the class structures and things like that, and dance and music, one of the main things I think about cultures is food, right? So when we talk about like these meals, unfortunately, a lot of people think ATRs, they think about sacrifices, but can you talk about the meal aspects of how that would bring the community together and what that would mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like food is so important. I mean, it doesn't matter what tradition you're talking about, Haiti or Cuba, people cook for days. They have to be ritually clean before they cook, so we're talking about no menstruating women. We're talking about, nobody who just, had some sort of hot sex encounter in the closet and then decided to go into the kitchen. That's a no-no.
Food safety, then, right?
Don't do it. Go clean yourself first. Get your head right. So, but I think that, so it's important. And usually, I mean, for feast days, it's days and days of cooking ahead of time. It's just, for me, everybody can get it if they show up to the ceremony and they eat something, even if they're 2 years old, even if they're, 102 and just propped up in the corner, because that's all the energy they have for that day, So it allows people to get that sacredness internalized on a deep level and really understand what it is that's happening there, and I think it's also a less reverence too, as well. Like I think I tell it in the book. I tell the story where I made all the Oshun foods and I cooked for days, and then 2 Oshun Santeras showed up and they couldn't eat that, because if you are initiated at that level, you have food taboos dedicated to that Orisha. So it was like, oh, now they're here at 10 o'clock at night and I've been cooking for 3 days and I have to make a whole separate meal for them. So that was a lot of fun, but it has to be done because, I can't dishonor them and disrespect them, but I also had to present the feast food. So it's very elaborate. I mean, you could spend your whole life just learning about, because it's not just the food, it's the sacred herbs, it's the, all of that other stuff that goes into it as well.
One of the I mean, we talked about that there's not many similarities, but what's your favorite part of the book? What did you have the most fun writing on this book?
I love doing the movie guide. I really love the movie guide because, I went to NYU film school, cost me a lot of money. And I watched a lot of film and television, and for years there was so much horrible film and television out there relating to voodoo, relating to Haitian voodoo. Even if we look at something like, Wade Davis and Serpent in the Rainbow, it was so Hollywood, it was so like, malicious and salacious and all of that. So being able to go back in and examine some of those movies. I mean, this is a reprint of an earlier book that was out of print. So to be able to add the new ones, like Jaimin Hansu's In Search of Voodoo, the documentary he did about Benin, was just fascinating and fantastic. So I think that really allowed me to get into the fun stuff. And I love writing about that kind of stuff.
So that's interesting. So the film aspects, like you mentioned that one, is there any other films that you would think people should go out and see today to get more of a handle on some of this?
Yeah, definitely. My friend Regine Romain made a documentary From Brooklyn to Benin. And because before I was from New Orleans, I was from Brooklyn. So she made the pilgrimage over there. And it's really a beautiful visual journey about going and finding out about voodoo back in, Africa in Benin and the practices here. So I believe that's on YouTube, so you can see that. She does a lot of film festivals and things like that, not just in New York, but around the country. So people can check that out. I'm a big fan of Eve's Bayou. I mean, if we're talking about major Hollywood films, because I think that really captures the feeling of magic and who in the South, like being in the swamp, being here where sort of things, the air is heavier and the water is, rising, and all of that is a magical place in a way. It's rough, but it's also a magical place. And I think she does a beautiful job of showing that.
You also in the book gave a whole bunch of resources for people to kind of find out more. Like it's kind of like a little bit of a sampler, but then there's a whole bunch more resources given.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any that stand out that you think, yeah, people should actually read this for each particular tradition, or any that stand out as really cutting above? Because we know that different traditions will have the different books.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I mentioned Louis Martinet. I love Lewis's books, all of Lewis's books. He did an amazing Dr. John anthology that has me and Witch Doctor Voodoo and him in it and stuff like that. So that's fascinating. I think there's a lot out there. There's just so much. I mean, the person who used to do my reviews for my newsletter back in the day was named John Gray. And he has a book that's an annotated bibliography called Ashe. It's like 600 pages, 8-point type. And it covers everything. So you literally could spend the rest of your life just like tracking down these things and reading them. It's crazy.
That book is not cheap either.
It is not. But good.
No.
A lot of not cheap books. That one's a not cheap book. Well, I know you talked about, I know you talked about being part of the Dr. John book, which I saw one of the first workings with Dr. John. That was many years ago by now. Say,
Mm-hmm.
What did you give our listeners kind of a sense of what it's like when you're kind of touching the divine from like in the Voodoo temple? Like, how does it feel to you? Like, what is it like when you're calling down a spirit or you're getting a spirit called in you? Uh, what's the experience like?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I did talk about it a little bit. Diana Paxson has a book about trance and possession that I have a piece in. So I did talk a little bit about it in there. But I don't know. To me, it's like a, let's see, how can I describe it? It's like, and if this isn't your experience, then it's not your experience. But for me, it's like, I don't know, maybe like, and I apologize if I'm offending anybody, a little bit of like mushrooms, a little bit of hash, like maybe a little bit of absinthe, maybe tiramisu or some other kind of like insane dessert, but also coffee thrown in there. Like it's like all of those things. It's like you have a psychedelic moment almost where you feel out of your body. Things feel maybe a bit of nitrous. You feel things feel tingly, like your nerve endings seem alive in a different way, but then you're also not present at the same time. So it's a weird duality where you're like hyper focused on the minute, but also absent from the whole thing and watching from up in the gallery seats. So it's kind of, for me, it's this weird in between liminal experience where it's everything and nothing all at the same time.
Do you ever have, I mean, we do a lot of possession work in our store, but do you ever have the experience where it's tough to remember things or even to conceptualize what you were watching from that perspective?
Oh, yeah. I find the more you try and the more you try and grab a hold of it, the more you try and explain it. Or, sometimes when I'm speaking another language, if I try and translate it, forget it. It's gone. It's gone. It's like the more you try and use the other side of your brain to make sense of it, the more it slips away.
So what would you recommend? Go ahead, Zach.
Well, I mean, also in the book too, you give a few baths, you give a few formulas on things. Anything you think, if people are brand new, you would recommend to them?
Yeah, I would definitely like the cleansing baths. Anybody can do that, I think that that's something that sort of also, I talk in there about doing like an ambrosia bath, which is, you go out and you get whatever's growing really close to your house. Obviously check, make sure it's not toxic and going to do anything to you, but you know what it is and safe. That's growing right next to your house. I mean, it might be a weed, but it's like, that's what the universe has brought to your doorstep. So it has the medicine that you need. So I think that, or even just doing a cleansing of the house with it, make like a scourge, tie it in a knot, take some Florida water or some spring water and sprinkle that around the house. Because again, that's going to have the ashe that you need to stay safe, to stay protected, to stay, sort of focused on the path that you need to stay on. So I think things like that, especially that are focused on things that are unique to you, unique to your own spirit, a place, and what you're gathering, what you're doing, what your mindset is in the moment is really helpful. Because even if it's a pandemic and we're on lockdown, we can do that. We can see what's growing, even if we don't have a garden, we can see what's growing in the flower pot, outside the building, all of those things.
One of the things that I had Zach early when I was teaching him how to work with herbs is I had him go out and study a dandelion plant and realize how much a dandelion has a will to live, like anywhere. Yes. Like the toughest plant ever, that once you experience it, like you're like, wow, this plant is one of the most badass plants in the world. And that's kind of what you're talking about. That's the ashe right around you.
It is. And I think about, I did a piece on dandelion the other day. You think about it, like that's the one magic all kids know. They know they can pick up a dandelion and make a wish. Like you can't say that about any other plant. Like it's crazy. True. It's like, wow, it's a tenacious little thing there. Yeah.
So that's, go out and get a dandelion, make a wish. That's start. But that's a brilliant advice, to go outside your house and see what's around. And obviously there's sort of apps now where you can actually figure out what a plant is, so you don't grab a poisonous plant if you're out in the forest.
Yeah, that's
Avoid
important.
poison ivy.
Yeah, no, don't
Or-
rub the poisonous plant on you. I had my godson once, we do a ritual bath initiation, and I asked him to make one, and he put red pepper in it because he's like, oh, that's good for protection. And I was like, but not in a bath, sweetheart. Like, he's like, well, I thought I could eat it. I was like, yeah, but like, you don't want to bathe in it.
Oh, yeah, that's just bad news. Red pepper, no.
Red pepper, no.
That's like pure cinnamon oil. No.
Oh, yeah.
No.
No, she ran screaming from the room like, I'm burning, into the shower. It was terrible.
It's probably necessary experiential learning.
Well, none of them are ever going to do that again. So as their teacher, I'm happy they all witnessed that. And now none of them are ever going to do anything so silly again.
Don't need to repeat the lesson on that one.
No.
So there you go. There's the takeaway for today. Don't put red hot peppers into a bath.
Or cinnamon.
Well, cinnamon is the thing that raw cinnamon's a little rough too.
Yeah.
At least the essential oil is a little rough.
Yeah. I mean, I wish people thought more about these things, but they'll learn, you know what I mean? That's where I am with it,
So was there any traditions that in the book that you found that you're just inspired to share today? Like maybe not even your favorite, but just something you feel like you'd like to share, like kind of that comes one of the traditions or one of the aspects that just kind of pop in your head that you think, yeah, this is what the listeners need to hear today.
I'm thinking about the section about Obeah because, for a really long time, Obeah was one of the things. I mean, now I think there's a couple new books coming out, but for a long time, people didn't talk about it. I mean, even my Jamaican friends, it was just something not discussed. The times I've gone to Jamaica, people, no, we don't talk about that. Even now, it's still something people don't like to talk about. So just finding some of that stuff out about like Queen Nanny and how she had all of this kind of maroon resistance, revolution kind of thing where there's legends that she's shooting bullets out of her ass. It's fantastic. It's just like, I just love this. Like, how did I miss this? She's on the money down there. But I feel like my personal knowledge of Jamaican history was lacking until I saw that. I was like, wow, that would have been so inspiring to me as I was growing up. Wait a minute. There was like this Black woman who just sort of, the Maroons, she just sort of ran off into the jungle and then, shot at the incoming, evil people. That's fantastic, inspirational. That's what I want to share.
It's kind of funny. Right before the show, we were mentioning about, we should totally talk about Obeah. Like, literally,
Really?
we're like, this is the one that like most.
It's great. I must be psychic.
Must be. It's a theme. We've had a couple people we could get on Obeah, but it's like it's one of the very interesting traditions that no one will talk about, except for very few people.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. I mean, I think a lot of that went underground. Unfortunately, I have a goddaughter who was learning from her teacher, and then the woman passed during the pandemic, so it's not written down, a lot of it's passed down, and it's just not something that was valued in the same way that it is now. So unfortunately, a lot of it's lost. But I'm fascinated by it just because of the root word, Obi, the fact that we're talking about coming from this kind of like snake worship. So since I love snakes so much, I love the fact that, it's called Obeah in all these British colonies like Jamaica and Belize and things like that. And it does seem to have more of a focus about snakes, definitely more of a focus on herbalism and things like that. talk about Priestess Miriam's husband. He was an Obeah man who, studied Belizean herbs and things like that. And there's a wealth of knowledge that he had that fortunately he wrote down in a book, and you can get it from Black Moon Publishing, Lewis's publishing company. So that's fortunate. But I just love that. I love all of that. Snakes and herbs and all of that stuff.
So coming up, have anything coming up that is interesting? You want to share it with people? Like, you usually have a lot going on. I know you kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's not for this book, but I'm so excited. I just found out today I made the Cosmopolitan's Best Witch Books of 2022 list. Both of my Water Magic and my Orisha's Goddesses and Voodoo Queens both made the list. So I'm really happy about that. And for new projects, I'm starting a community garden. The city has given me a piece of land that is about a block from my house that I'm going to plant indigenous, local herbs and give everything away for free. Food, berries, trees. Yeah.
Nice.
So I'm excited.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations
I feel like I'm doing something. Yeah.
Well, it sounded like you won multiple awards, like.
I know.
It sounded
good.
pretty.
It's good.
Gotta feel good to win all those awards, right?
It does. It's funny. I was just thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice? Literally, like 2 days ago, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice to be in like Cosmo or one of those big magazines? And then I checked this morning. I'm like, wait a minute, I am. That's great. Yay.
There you go.
There you go. Nice. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
2 in 1 year, that's pretty good, right?
That is.
Oh, definitely. And like you were saying about like this book was the last one that came out. That came out in 2021. So I don't know how I made the best of 2022 list with 2 books that came out in 2020, but I will take it and I will
Take it and enjoy.
We know the reason, because COVID has stopped time for everyone.
It's true. It's true. It's
time,
true.
Time now sort of just feels different.
It does.
AC
it has new meaning.
after COVID.
Oh, I like that. AC after COVID. That's good.
After COVID
That's good.
and before COVID. Time is different
BC.
after COVID.
BC.
Before COVID. Yeah. You got it. You got new.
That's great. I love it.
There you go. So
That's fantastic. Yeah. Right on.
So Lilith, so you said a little bit about the garden, but do you have any other new projects coming up? Kind of hinted at it there, that you might have one.
I don't have anything definitive like a, signed contract for another book, but I do have a lot of ideas. Problem is, every time I come up with one, somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm writing a book about that. There's a lot of books out there. They're like, ding dang. And the universe tells me that
there you go.
Whatever book you were thinking of is probably the book you should.
That's the book right there.
Regardless of whether or not somebody is writing it.
Yeah.
Right. So, it seems like you might have to go answer the door. But we appreciate you coming on the show today. We'd love to have you come back once you get the next project done, which it sounds like the door just opened, right?
I know, right? Get to writing. I know. Crap.
That's what it sounded like, that you mentioned the book you had in mind, and then the door rings. I kind of, knowing how certain of the spirits we all work with work, I take that as a sign. Not subtle, but... And again, that's how it is, right?
It's a sign.
I'll see that.
No, I would love to come back.
We'd love to have you
back.
So a little about our center. We're at 607 Gerard Street. You need spiritual goods? You need acupuncture? We're both. Acupuncture clinic. In the heart of East Chinatown. Again, the Sangha, the Golden Tree Sangha. You want to talk about it, Zach, since...
Golden Tree Sangha. We're going to be doing Taoist rituals, Buddhist rituals, Hindu rituals. Monkey King is going to be on the tier list, probably as one of the first ones. We're also going to be doing a Lucky Buddha one. So if you need like luck, there you go.
And if you need to transform bad luck to good luck, we've been doing a lot of bad luck to good luck Buddhist rituals lately. In Sangha, in October, we will be doing actually some voodoo work that for sponsors we could talk about. We'll be doing our Fekete, so we're starting to actually prepare now for
Yes, we
All
are.
right. That's good.
Fekete, because you have to.
Yep.
Especially with the unfortunate amount of dead from the last year or so. But we're at 607 Gerard Street. Now, while we do require masks, because we consider ourselves sane, and we're actually a acupuncture and medical clinic as well as a spiritual store, so you got to wear masks because we have cancer patients. We do have all your needs. We just made the potion master. My wife just made a whole batch of Florida water, which only uses essential oils and is phenomenal.
It is phenomenal.
Phenomenal Florida water. You just spray a little on you and smell it, and you get a little zing in your step. It's just like, oh!
It is like sunshine in a bottle. Literally from Florida State, it feels like.
So we got it in Toronto, like magical potion master potion master of our store, back at it. So really, really good stuff. So we're making stuff. We're making more stuff. We have over 300, more like 400 herbs on the shelves between the Chinese medical herbs and the magical herbs. Come by if you're in Toronto. That keeps the light on for the show. Is everyone coming and supporting us in Toronto? And so come by. And likewise for sponsors, Zach, tell them what they get if they're a sponsor of this show.
As a sponsor, you get a lot. So one, you get access to our public library that has over 700 books. Two, you get access to 2.5, almost 3 years worth of content and rituals that have been recorded online. And as
also,
long as you're a sponsor...
Wait, hold up a second. Hold up the book again. In fact, this is one of the books that is in part of the library that you could check out right now. Check out Lilith's book in person. Or take it home, because we allow you to check it out if you're a sponsor. And Absolutely. If you're here, it's free. All right, Ted, keep going. I want to point out that Lilith's book's right here on the shelves.
It is.
Actually, a couple of our books on the shelves, so you can check out a couple of Lilith's books right now.
Yes, they are awesome books. So, and then for the workshops, again, almost 3 years worth of online rituals, workshops. Currently, as a sponsor, you'll get access to all the future workshops on a monthly subscription. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing. Thank you for subscribing. We get to see on the screen. This is awesome. So this is where we're going to be doing a third eye workshop tomorrow. And then 2 weeks from now, being on July 30th, we're going to do crown chakra. Then we're going to go into the Western elements and then the tarot. So we're going to be...
As per everyone's request, I will run a series of workshops on both divinatory tarot and magical use of tarot. By magical, I mean enchantment. As per everyone's request to our sponsors. Yes. Not everyone's, but a whole bunch of people asked just for that. So, okay, you're going to get it. But before I can cover the tarot, I have to cover the elements.
So that's going to be all in-depth workshops coming up, and then those are online and possibly in person, depending when things are going to happen once we rearrange the space. We also have co-op. Sunday co-ops here. So if you're a sponsor, you get to see us do the work and ask us questions. So not a formal workshop, but when we're building the stuff, doing the magic, you'd be like, you can watch us and ask questions specifically around that for our sponsors.
Right. This week, Peaceful Home.
Yep. Week after, possibly moist incense. So.
Very good. That's what we're going to do. Like every week, we kind of make something every Sunday for the store. So unfortunately, I have 2 jobs, so that's when I do my work. And kind of put the rubber to the road, as it were. So when I make the stuff. It's very good. If you're in Toronto or you're on vacation to Toronto, stop by. We'd love to see you. And as always, what we tell everyone, stay healthy and safe. I know I noticed a lot of people getting sick the last couple of weeks, so really stay safe and happy. And if you can stay on just for a second, we want to express our appreciation again. But everyone stay safe and happy. And we'll see you next week. Same bat channel, same bat time.
Thank you.